Let me be clear about something right up front. I never imagined my life would turn into one of those stories. You know, the ones where desperation leads to questionable decisions that somehow turn into something beautiful. But here I am, about to tell you exactly that kind of story. It was March in New York City, and I was officially broke. Not the "I can't go out this weekend" kind of broke. Not even the "I'm eating ramen for a month" kind of broke. I was the "I have $47 in my bank account and rent is due in 3 days" kind of broke. The kind that makes you physically sick every time you check your phone, dreading another overdraft notification. My name is Alex Chen, I'm 26 years old, and 6 months ago I'd made the monumentally stupid decision to quit my soul-crushing corporate job to pursue my dream of becoming a freelance graphic designer. I had a modest savings cushion, a portfolio I was proud of, and the kind of naive optimism that only someone who's never truly struggled can have. That optimism lasted exactly 4 months. Turns out, breaking into freelance design in New York City is like trying to swim up a waterfall. Everyone wants experience, but no one wants to be the first to hire you. Everyone loves your work, but budgets are tight. Everyone promises to keep you in mind for future projects, which is code for never contact us again. I'd burned through my savings covering rent, utilities, and the basic necessities of staying alive in the most expensive city in America. I'd taken on gig work, food delivery, dog walking, anything that would pay, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. And now, staring at the eviction notice that had been slipped under my door, I felt the full weight of my terrible decision crushing down on me. The notice was from my landlord, Mr. Vega. I had 72 hours to pay the $2,100 I owed for this month's rent, plus the $900 I still owed from last month. He'd given me an extension then, which I'd foolishly thought meant I'd figure things out. If I couldn't pay, I'd be out on the street. In New York City in March, with no safety net. I sat on my bed, a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment in Washington Heights that was barely bigger than a walk-in closet, and tried not to cry. I'd already called everyone I could think of. My parents were helping my younger sister with her medical school loans and couldn't spare anything. My friends were all in the same struggling millennial boat. I'd looked into loans, but my credit was shot from maxing out my cards. I was out of options. That's when my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Alex, this is Christian Vega. I know you received the notice. Please come to my office tomorrow at 2 p.m. We need to discuss your situation." My landlord wanting to meet, that couldn't be good. Here's what I knew about Christian Vega before that meeting. He owned the building I lived in, plus two others in the neighborhood. He was 34 years old. I'd seen it on some paperwork once. He was devastatingly handsome in that way that made me actively avoid eye contact whenever we crossed paths. And he was always impeccably dressed, even when he was just checking on building maintenance. What I didn't know was literally everything else about him. His office was in the basement of our building, a surprisingly nice space with exposed brick, modern furniture, and actual art on the walls. When I knocked at 2 p.m. sharp, my stomach was in knots. "Come in," a deep voice called. Christian Vega was sitting behind a sleek desk, wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. He had dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and these intense brown eyes that seemed to see right through you. He looked up from his laptop and gestured to the chair across from him. "Alex, thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? I tried to joke, but it came out bitter. "You always have a choice," he said evenly. "Sit." I sat. He closed his laptop and gave me his full attention, which was somehow worse than when he'd been distracted. "Let's talk about your situation." "I don't have the money," I said bluntly. "I know I owe you almost $3,000 and I don't have it. I've been trying to find work, but—" "I'm aware of your situation," Christian interrupted. "You quit your job at a marketing firm to freelance. It hasn't gone as planned. You've been doing gig work but can't keep up with expenses." I stared at him. "How do you know all that?" "I make it my business to know my tenants, especially when they're struggling." "You're a good tenant, Alex. You've never been late before last month. You keep your apartment clean. You don't cause problems. So I've been paying attention, waiting to see if you'd figure it out." "Well, I haven't figured it out," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "and I don't know what to do." Christian leaned back in his chair, studying me. "What if I told you I had a proposal? A way for you to stay in your apartment without paying rent for the next 3 months. My heart jumped. "What kind of proposal?" I need help, Christian said simply. I'm managing 3 buildings, dealing with contractors, handling maintenance issues, fielding tenant complaints, managing finances, coordinating repairs, and I'm drowning. I need an assistant, someone organized, responsible, and good with people. You want me to work for you? In exchange for rent? 3 months rent-free, you work for me 20 hours a week, helping with administrative tasks, coordinating with contractors, handling tenant issues, managing my calendar. It's not glamorous work, but it would solve your immediate problem. I wanted to say yes immediately, but something held me back. Why me? You could hire a professional assistant. Christian's expression was unreadable. Call it intuition. I think you're capable of more than you're currently doing, and I believe in helping people who are trying to help themselves. What happens after 3 months? If it works out, we renegotiate. Maybe you keep working for me and we adjust your rent. Maybe by then your freelance work has picked up and you can pay full rent again. We'll figure it out. It was too good to be true. It had to be. There's no catch, no strings attached. Christian's jaw tightened slightly. I'm offering you a professional arrangement, Alex. You work, I provide rent relief, that's it. If you're uncomfortable with that, you're free to decline and find another solution to your rent problem. The way he said it, formal, almost cold, made me feel stupid for implying anything else. Of course, there were no strings attached. What did I think, that my rich, straight landlord was going to proposition me? This wasn't some fantasy. This was a business arrangement. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I didn't mean to suggest. It's fine. He pulled out a contract from his desk drawer. Here are the terms, read it carefully. If you agree, sign it and start tomorrow at 9 a.m. I took the contract with shaking hands. It was straightforward, 20 hours per week of administrative work in exchange for 3 months of rent forgiveness. Professional, clear, no hidden clauses. Can I ask you something? I said, looking up from the paper. Why are you being so nice to me? Christian's expression softened slightly. Because I've been where you are. 10 years ago, I was sleeping on a couch in my cousin's apartment, working 3 jobs, convinced I'd never make anything of myself. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. I'm just paying it forward. I signed the contract. Working for Christian Vega was nothing like I expected. For one thing, he was actually a good boss. Patient, clear with instructions, willing to explain things I didn't understand. For another, he was nothing like the cold, distant landlord I'd imagined. He was funny, occasionally self-deprecating, and surprisingly down-to-earth once you got past the expensive suits. My first week was overwhelming. I learned the building management software, memorized tenant names and apartment numbers, started organizing his chaotic filing system. The man was brilliant at business but terrible at paperwork, and accompanied him on inspections of all 3 buildings he owned. This is the Riverside property, Christian explained as we walked through a beautiful brownstone in the West 140s. I bought it 3 years ago. It was a disaster. Squatters, water damage, the works, took a year to renovate. How did you afford that? I asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's too personal. It's fine. I worked in real estate development for 8 years, saved aggressively, and took a massive risk buying my first property. I got lucky with the market timing. That's not luck, that's smart. Christian glanced at me, something unreadable in his expression. You'd be surprised how much success is just timing and being willing to bet on yourself. By the second week, I'd fallen into a routine. Mornings in Christian's office handling emails and scheduling. Afternoons coordinating with contractors or dealing with tenant issues. It was satisfying work, tangible problems with real solutions. Plus, I was still finding time in the evenings to work on my design portfolio. The weird part was how much time I spent with Christian. 20 hours a week of work meant we were together almost 3 full days. We'd grab lunch at the bodega down the street. We'd debate the best pizza in Washington Heights. We'd vent about difficult tenants, never by name, and laugh at the absurd situations that came up in property management. Like the time Mrs. Rodriguez from 4C called in hysterics because she was convinced there was a ghost in her apartment. It turned out to be her neighbor's wind chimes creating a weird echo through the pipes. Or when Mr. Cum tried to install a urinal in his bathroom without permits and flooded 3 apartments below him. Working with Christian, I started to see him as a person rather than just my landlord. I learned that he was allergic to shellfish but loved sushi, that he'd grown up in the Bronx, the youngest of 4 kids, that he'd lost his father when he was 19 and had to help support his family while finishing college, that he still sent money home to his mom every month. I also learned that he was gay. It came up casually one afternoon when we were reviewing insurance documents. His phone rang and he glanced at the screen and grimaced. "Sorry, I need to take this," he said, stepping out of the office. Through the door, I could hear his side of the conversation. "No, muckas, I told you we're done. It doesn't matter if you're sorry, you cheated on me, that's not something you just move past. I have to go." When he came back in, he looked stressed. I pretended I hadn't heard anything, but Christian sighed and said, "My ex, he can't take a hint." I said, trying to sound casual even though my brain was short-circuiting. "That's rough. We dated for 2 years, I thought we were serious, turns out he had a different definition of serious." Christian ran a hand through his hair. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about my relationship drama." "It's okay," I said. For what it's worth, he sounds like an idiot. Christian laughed, a real genuine laugh. "Thanks, Alex." That night, lying on my mattress on the floor, I tried to process this information. Christian was gay, Christian was single, Christian was my boss and my landlord, and I absolutely could not develop feelings for him. Too late. The thing about not wanting to develop feelings for someone is that it makes you hype koa of all the reasons you're developing feelings for them. Like how Christian always remembered my coffee order, oat milk latte, extra shot. Or how he'd casually mention freelance design opportunities he'd heard about, sending me contacts without making a big deal of it. Or how he'd instituted a no working past 6 p.m. rule after he found me in the office at 9 p.m. one night because burnout helps no one. Or how he looked in the morning before he put on his professional facade, slightly rumpled, reading glasses perched on his nose, more approachable and real. I was in trouble. "You have a crush on your landlord," my best friend Jenna announced during our weekly video call. "You're so obvious about it." "I do not have a crush on him," I lied. "Alex, you just spent 15 minutes describing the way he reorganized the filing system. With enthusiasm, you're either in love with him or you need better hobbies." "He's my boss and my landlord, nothing can happen." "Why not?" "Because he's doing me a huge favor, the power dynamic is all wrong. If I said anything and he didn't feel the same way, I'd lose my job and probably my apartment. It would be a disaster." "But what if he does feel the same way?" "He doesn't." "You don't know that." "Jenna, he's a successful property owner. I'm a broke freelancer living in a studio. We're in completely different leagues." "That's your insecurity talking," Jenna said gently. "You need to work on that." She was right, but that didn't make it easier. The situation got more complicated in week 5. We were doing a late-night inspection of the Riverside property after reports of a gas smell turned out to be a tenant's awful cooking. It was past 11 p.m. by the time we finished, and we were both exhausted. "I'll drive you home," Christian said. "You don't have to." "Alex, it's nearly midnight, I'm not letting you take the subway." In his car, a sleek BMW that he somehow parallel parked like a magician, we sat in comfortable silence for most of the ride. Then, at a red light, Christian said, "Can I ask you something personal?" My heart rate spiked. "Sure." "Why did you really quit your job, the corporate one?" I thought about giving him the sanitized version, but something about the late hour and the darkness made me honest. Because I was miserable. I'd wake up every morning with this weight on my chest, dreading the day. I'd sit in meetings about marketing strategies for products I didn't care about, working for people who saw me as expendable. And I kept thinking, is this it? Is this what I'm going to do for the next 40 years? Christian nodded slowly, "And design makes you feel different." "Yes, when I'm designing, I lose track of time. I get excited about projects. I feel like I'm creating something that matters, even if it's just a logo for a small business or a website for a local nonprofit. It feels purposeful." "Then you made the right choice." "Even though I'm broke and almost got evicted." "Especially then," Christian said firmly. "You took a risk on yourself. Most people never have that courage. They stay in jobs they hate because it's safe and they die never knowing what they could have become." There was something in his voice, a depth of feeling that made me think he wasn't just talking about me. Is that why you started your business? I asked. Partly, I worked for a development company that only cared about profit margins. They'd buy buildings in gentrifying neighborhoods, jack up the rents, and force out longtime residents. I hated it. So I left and promised myself I'd do things differently, buy properties, renovate them, but keep them affordable. Actually serve the community instead of exploiting it. That's why your rents are lower than market rate, I realized. People deserve a place to live without being gouged, Christian said simply. It's not charity, I still make money, I'm just not making obscene money at the expense of people who are already struggling. The light turned green, but neither of us moved for a second. Then Christian cleared his throat and started driving. When we got to my building, he turned to me and said, "Thank you." For what? For caring about the work, for taking it seriously, for being, he paused, reliable. It's made a real difference. I should have just said "you're welcome" and gotten out of the car. Instead, I said, "You've made a difference too. This job, this chance you gave me, it literally saved my life." Christian's expression was intense in the dim light. "Alex." My phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A message from Jenna. "Did you die? You were supposed to check in an hour ago." "I should go," I said quickly, suddenly afraid of whatever was happening between us. "Thanks for the ride." I practically ran into my building, my heart pounding. The next morning, everything felt different. Christian was more distant, more professional. He didn't make jokes. He didn't ask about my weekend plans. He was polite, efficient, and completely closed off. I told myself I'd imagined the moment in the car, or that I'd crossed a line and now he was pulling back to reinforce boundaries. Either way, it hurt. This continued for a week. I'd come to work, complete my tasks, and leave. Christian was never rude, but the easy camaraderie we'd built was gone. It felt like working for a stranger. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked one afternoon when we were alone in the office. Christian looked up from his laptop, surprised. "What?" "You've been different this week, distant. If I did something to make you uncomfortable, I'm sorry." "You didn't." Christian stopped, closed his laptop, and rubbed his face. "Alex, you didn't do anything wrong." "Then what's going on?" He stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, "I'm trying to maintain professional boundaries." "We've been professional," I said, confused. "No, we haven't." Christian turned to face me. "Professional bosses don't look forward to seeing their assistants every morning. They don't find excuses to extend lunch breaks so they can keep talking. They don't lie awake at night thinking about conversations they had earlier that day." My breath caught. "Christian." "I'm attracted to you," he said, his voice strained. "I have been for weeks, maybe longer, and I've been trying to ignore it because it's inappropriate and I'm your boss and you're in a vulnerable position, but last week in the car I almost—" He stopped himself. "I needed to create distance before I did something I'd regret." I stood up, my legs shaky. "What if I don't want distance?" "Alex, you don't understand the position you're in. You're dependent on me for housing and income. Anything between us would be—" "I'm not dependent on you," I interrupted. "I'm working for you, there's a difference." "The power dynamic." "The power dynamic is only a problem if you're abusing it," I said, taking a step closer. "Are you planning to abuse it?" "Of course not." "Then the only question is whether we're both willing to risk this arrangement for something more." Christian stared at me. "You're attracted to me." "God, yes." I thought I was being so obvious. "I thought I was projecting," Christian admitted, "seeing what I wanted to see." "You weren't projecting." We stood there 3 feet apart, the air between us crackling with tension. "If we do this," Christian said slowly, "we do it right. We renegotiate your work arrangement so there's no question of impropriety. We keep the relationship separate from the work. And if it doesn't work out, we have a plan for how you keep your housing and job without awkwardness." "You've thought about this," I observed. "I've thought about nothing else for 2 weeks." I closed the distance between us. "Kiss me." Christian cupped my face with both hands, his touch gentle but his gaze intense. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I'd disappear. Then I pressed closer and something broke open between us, all that restrained tension pouring out in a kiss that made my knees weak. His hands slid into my hair. My fingers gripped his shirt. We kissed like we'd been waiting our whole lives for this moment. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Christian rested his forehead against mine. "We're really doing this?" he asked. "We're really doing this?" Renegotiating my work arrangement was surprisingly straightforward. Christian drafted a new contract. I'd work 15 hours a week at a standard hourly rate that was actually fair, and I'd pay a reduced rent that I could now afford with my wages plus the freelance work I'd been picking up. Everything was documented, professional, and clear. "This way, there's no confusion about why you're here or what you're owed," Christian explained as we reviewed the paperwork. "You're not dependent on our relationship for your housing." "You really thought of everything," I said. "I told you, I've been thinking about this for a while." Dating Christian was different from anything I'd experienced before. For one thing, he was an actual adult with his life together, something I'd never dated before. He cooked real meals, he had a retirement account. He went to the dentist regularly. It was both impressive and slightly intimidating. But he was also surprisingly vulnerable in private. He'd had a rough time accepting his sexuality in his early 20s, coming from a traditional family. His father's death had happened right after he'd come out, and he'd always carried guilt about that timing, even though they'd reconciled before the end. "My last relationship ended badly," Christian told me one night as we lay tangled together in his bed, which was a real bed with a frame and everything. "Marcus was my first serious boyfriend after years of casual dating. I thought we were building something real. But he was just using me, my money, my connections, my stability while sleeping with half of Manhattan." "I'm sorry," I said, running my fingers through his hair. "I became cynical after that, started seeing relationships as transactions. Everyone wants something." He turned to look at me. "But with you, it feels different." "Different how?" "Like you see me, not what I can provide, like you'd be here even if I had nothing." "I was attracted to you when I thought you were just my grumpy landlord," I pointed out, "before I knew about the cars and the properties and all of this." Christian smiled. "Grumpy landlord." "You had resting stern face, it was intimidating." "I was trying not to stare at you," he admitted. "You'd moved in wearing these paint-splattered jeans and this oversized sweater, looking like a starving artist, and I thought, this is the most beautiful person I've ever seen and I need to be extremely professional right now." "You thought I was beautiful." "I thought you were devastating." We made it official 3 weeks into dating. Christian wanted to be upfront with his building's tenants about our relationship, so he sent out a memo explaining that we were together but that it wouldn't affect his management of the properties or anyone's tenancy. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Mrs. Rodriguez from 4C even sent a card congratulating us. My freelance work picked up significantly, partly because Christian connected me with small business owners in the neighborhood who needed design work. He never pressured anyone or made it weird, he just casually mentioned, "My partner does excellent design work if you're looking," and let them decide. "You don't have to promote my work," I told him. "I'm not promoting it because you're my boyfriend," Christian said. "I'm promoting it because you're talented and these businesses need help and it's a good match. If your work was bad, I wouldn't say anything." "That's very romantic." "I'll save the romance for when I'm not talking about your professional skills." He did save the romance. Surprise weekend trips to the Hudson Valley, cooking lessons where we'd end up making out more than cooking, long walks through the city at night talking about everything and nothing. But there were also challenges. 3 months into our relationship, Marcus, Christian's ex, showed up at the office. I was alone working on some invoices when a tall, ridiculously handsome man walked in like he owned the place. "Is Christian here?" he asked without introducing himself. "He's at a property inspection, can I help you?" Marcus looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "You must be the new assistant, how cute. Tell Christian that Marcus stopped by, he'll know what it's about." He left before I could respond, but something about the encounter felt off. When Christian returned, I told him about the visit. Christian's expression darkened. "What did he say exactly?" "Just that he stopped by and you know what it's about." Damn it! Christian pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway. I could hear his raised voice through the door but couldn't make out words. When he came back, he looked furious. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he said. "Marcus is persistent." "What did he want?" Christian hesitated, then decided to be honest. He wants money. He claims I owe him for emotional damages from our breakup. It's ridiculous, but he's threatening to make trouble if I don't pay. What kind of trouble? He implied he'd spread rumors about my business practices, suggest that I'm exploiting tenants or engaging in some kind of fraud. It's all baseless, but rumors can be damaging. That's extortion. It's Marcus. Christian sat down heavily. He knows I've worked hard to build a reputation in this community. He's betting that I'll pay him to go away rather than risk that reputation. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell him to go to hell, Christian said firmly. I'm not giving him a cent. If he wants to make up lies, I'll deal with it. I have nothing to hide. But Marcus wasn't bluffing. Over the next week, he started a whisper campaign telling people that Christian was overcharging tenants, that he was planning to sell the buildings to developers, that he was engaged in various financial improprieties. None of it was true, but the rumors spread. Worse, Marcus started targeting me specifically. He showed up at one of my freelance client meetings, introducing himself as a concerned citizen and suggesting that I might not be the most reliable choice given my complicated relationship with my landlord. I lost the client. This is getting out of hand, I told Christian that night. He's trying to destroy both of our reputations. I know I'm handling it. How? I've hired a lawyer. We're pursuing a cease and desist, and if that doesn't work, we'll file a defamation suit. But these things take time. What if he ruins everything before the legal stuff works? Yeah. Christian pulled me close. Then we rebuild together. I've lost things before, Alex. I've started over. It's not fun, but it's survivable. What I can't survive is compromising my principles by giving in to blackmail. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. You're not the problem, Mukaz is, and he's doing this because he knows the best way to hurt me is to hurt you. Christian cupped my face, but I'm not going to let him. The situation came to a head 2 weeks later when Mukaz showed up at one of Christian's properties, trying to convince tenants to break their leases. Mrs. Rodriguez called Christian immediately, and he arrived to find Mukaz in the building's courtyard making wild accusations. You're exploiting these people, Mukaz was shouting, keeping them in substandard housing while you get rich. This building was condemned before Christian bought it, Mrs. Rodriguez shot back. He renovated it and gave us fair leases. You don't know what you're talking about. Other tenants gathered and they weren't on Mukaz's side. Mr. Cum from the top floor said, Mr. Vega fixed my heating in February when it broke, didn't charge me extra, and even brought my family dinner that night because he knew we had a newborn. You want to tell me he's exploiting us? Mukaz's face reddened as tenant after tenant defended Christian. When Christian finally arrived, Mukaz tried one last play. Tell them about your little arrangement with your assistant, Mukaz sneered. Tell them how you're shacking up with someone you have power over. Alex and I are in a relationship, Christian said calmly. We've been transparent about it. His work arrangement is properly documented and compensated. Our personal relationship has nothing to do with my management of these properties. He couldn't pay rent, so you. I offered him a job which he's excelling at, Christian interrupted. The same way I've helped other tenants who were struggling, Mrs. Rodriguez. I gave you a payment plan when your hours got cut. Mr. Cum, I waived late fees when your son was in the hospital. Helping people isn't exploitation, it's being a decent human being. Mukaz realized he'd lost. The tenants weren't buying his story. If anything, they were more loyal to Christian than before. He left with threats about lawyers that everyone knew were empty. After he was gone, Christian turned to the gathered tenants. I apologize for bringing that drama to your homes. It won't happen again. Don't apologize, Mrs. Rodriguez said. We know who you are. Some bitter ex-boyfriend can't change that. That night, lying in Christian's arms, I said, you have good tenants. I have great tenants, Christian agreed, and I have you. Even though dating me brought all this drama. Especially because of that, Mukaz showed his true colors and the community showed theirs. I'd say it worked out. He kissed the top of my head. Besides, you're worth any amount of drama. 6 months into our relationship, something unexpected happened. My design career actually took off. It started with a referral from one of Christian's tenants, a small startup that needed branding. I created a logo and style guide they loved, and they recommended me to another company who recommended me to another. Suddenly, I had more work than I could handle. I think I need to cut back my hours with you, I told Christian one evening. Not because I want to, but because the design work is taking up so much time. Christian smiled. I've been waiting for you to say that. You have. Alex, you're talented. I've always known you'd figure it out. I'm proud of you. We renegotiated again. I went down to 5 hours a week, just enough to help with basic admin tasks but leaving me free to focus on design. I also finally moved out of my studio apartment and into Christian's place in Rivendell. Are you sure about this? I asked as we packed up my few belongings. Moving in together after 6 months is fast. You've been staying at my place 4 nights a week anyway, Christian pointed out. This just makes it official, plus think of all the money you'll save on rent. I thought we were keeping finances separate. We are. You're contributing to household expenses. I'm just not charging you market rate rent for half of a 2-bedroom in Rivendell because that would be insane. Living with Christian was both exactly what I expected and nothing like I imagined. He was neat but not obsessive. He gave me space but was always there when I needed him. We developed routines: morning coffee together, Sunday night cooking experiments, Friday movie nights on the couch. We also fought, which was new for me. My previous relationships had been either too casual for real conflict or so dysfunctional that we fought about everything. With Christian, we disagreed about real things: how to handle money, how much time to spend with friends versus each other, whose family to visit for holidays. But we learned to fight fair, to take breaks when things got heated, to actually listen instead of just waiting for our turn to talk, to apologize when we were wrong and forgive when we were hurt. This is what adult relationships look like, Jenna observed during one of our video calls. It's boring and healthy, and I'm so proud of you. It's not boring, I protested. You just spent 10 minutes telling me about your system for splitting grocery costs. It's boring, but in the best way. She was right. It was boring in the best way. It was stable, secure, and sustainable. It was everything I'd never thought I deserved. Everything was going perfectly, too perfectly. I should have known something would happen. It was a random Tuesday when Christian got the call. His mother had fallen and broken her hip. She needed surgery and would require months of recovery and physical therapy. His siblings were helping, but someone needed to coordinate care, manage her finances, and oversee the renovations needed to make her home accessible. I need to go to the Bronx, Christian said, already pulling up his calendar. My mom needs me. Of course, I said. What can I do? I need you to manage the properties while I'm dealing with this. I know it's more than you signed up for, but I'll do it, I said immediately. Whatever you need. The next 2 months were intense. Christian was splitting his time between his mom's place and home, stressed and exhausted. I was managing 3 buildings, coordinating repairs, handling tenant issues, and somehow also keeping up with my design work. We barely saw each other. When we did, Christian was too tired to do anything but collapse. Our easy intimacy was replaced by logistical discussions and scheduling conflicts. I feel like we're roommates who occasionally see each other, not partners, I admitted one night. Christian looked up from his laptop, guilt written across his face. I know, I'm sorry, I just need to get through this crisis with my mom and then. I'm not complaining, I said quickly. I miss you. Even when you're sitting right here, I miss you. Christian closed his laptop and pulled me into his arms. I miss you too. This isn't how I want things to be. Your mom needs you, that comes first. But you need me too, and I'm failing you. You're not failing me, I said firmly. You're dealing with a family crisis. I can handle a few months of this. But it wasn't just a few months. Christian's mother's recovery was complicated. She developed an infection that required additional hospitalization. Then there were setbacks with physical therapy. Christian was stretched thin, trying to be there for his family while also managing his business. And I was drowning. Managing 3 buildings was no joke. There were constant issues: broken heaters, plumbing problems, noise complaints, late rent payments. I was working 12-hour days, barely sleeping, neglecting my design clients, and feeling resentful in a way that made me hate myself. You need to ask Christian for help, Jenna said during one of our calls. He's dealing with his mom, I can't add to his stress. Alex, you're going to burn out, and then you won't be able to help anyone. She was right, but I kept pushing, determined to prove that Christian hadn't made a mistake by trusting me with this responsibility. Then everything broke at once. A pipe burst in the Washington Heights building, flooding 4 apartments. The Riverside property failed a building inspection and needed immediate repairs, and one of my biggest design clients threatened to take their business elsewhere because I'd missed a deadline. I was sitting in Christian's office at 2 a.m., surrounded by paperwork, trying not to cry when Christian came in. "Alex, what are you doing here so late?" I looked up at him, this man I loved who looked like a stranger after weeks of barely connecting. The pipe burst. "I've been coordinating with the plumber and the insurance company, and there's the inspection report for Riverside that needs." "Why didn't you call me?" "You're dealing with your mom." "And you're dealing with too much." Christian sat down next to me, taking in the chaos around us. "Alex, I never meant for you to carry all of this alone. You needed me to handle it. I needed you to manage things, not sacrifice yourself. There's a difference." He turned to face me fully. "When's the last time you slept a full night? When's the last time you worked on your design projects? When's the last time you did something just for you?" I couldn't remember. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Christian said quietly, "that you'd stretch yourself too thin trying to prove something." "I'm not trying to prove anything." "Yes, you are. You're trying to prove you deserve this, the job, the relationship, all of it. But Alex, you already deserve it. You don't have to earn your place in my life." I felt tears spilling over. I was so broke, so desperate. "You saved me. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," Christian said firmly. "I offered you a job because I needed help and you were capable. Everything that came after our relationship, building a life together, that's not debt, that's choice. We chose each other. I don't want to let you down." "You're not letting me down, but you are hurting yourself and I can't watch that happen." He pulled me into his arms. "We're going to fix this. I'm going to hire a property manager to take some of the load off. You're going to focus on your design work, and we're going to remember that we're partners, not savior and saved." Christian kept his word. He hired a property manager named Diana, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been managing buildings in the Bronx for 20 years. She took over the day-to-day operations, leaving me to handle only the strategic decisions and special projects I actually enjoyed. With the pressure off, Christian and I started rebuilding our relationship. We instituted a no-work talk after 7 p.m. rule. We scheduled actual dates, dinners out, museums, comedy shows. We went to therapy together to work through the resentment and communication issues that had built up during the crisis. "You both fell into caretaking roles," our therapist explained. "Christian took care of his mother, Alex took care of the business, but neither of you took care of yourselves or each other." Learning to ask for help was hard for both of us. Christian had spent his whole adult life being the responsible one, the provider, the person everyone else leaned on. I'd spent mine trying to prove I wasn't a burden. Together, we had to learn that interdependence wasn't weakness, it was strength. Christian's mother eventually recovered enough to live independently with some assistance. Christian was able to step back from daily caregiving, though he still visited her twice a week. She adored me, which helped. "My son is happy," she told me once in Spanish, which Christian translated, fighting a smile. "He smiles more now, you're good for him." "He's good for me too," I replied through Christian. "Good, you keep each other good." My design business stabilized and then thrived. I built a client roster I was proud of: small businesses, nonprofits, a few larger corporations. I hired a part-time assistant to help with administrative work. I moved into a proper office space. Christian was endlessly supportive, celebrating every win and helping me strategize through every challenge. But he also knew when to step back and let me figure things out on my own. "I don't need you to solve my problems," I told him once. "I just need you to listen while I work through them." "I'm learning that," Christian said. "It's hard because I'm a fixer by nature, but I'm trying to trust that you can handle your own challenges." "I can, and when I can't, I'll ask for help." "Promise." "Promise." 2 years into our relationship, Christian took me back to the Washington Heights building where I'd first lived. We stood outside my old studio apartment, now occupied by a college student who reminded me of my younger self. "Remember when you lived here?" Christian asked. How could I forget? I was convinced my life was over. And now I know it was just beginning. Christian took my hand. "I've been thinking about that day you came to my office. You were so scared, so desperate, but you were also brave. You signed that contract not knowing if you could trust me. You took a chance. Best decision I ever made." "I'm about to ask you to take another chance," Christian said, pulling a small box from his pocket. My heart stopped. "Alex Chen, you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. You've challenged me, supported me, and loved me even when I was difficult to love. You've built a life you're proud of, and I'm so honored to be part of it. I don't want to be your landlord anymore." "You're not my landlord," I said, laughing through sudden tears. "We live together." "Exactly. I want us to buy a place together, something that's ours, not mine that you're borrowing. I want to build something with you, not just a home, but a whole life. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, simple, elegant, exactly my style. "Yes," I said, not even having to think about it. "Yes, absolutely yes." Christian slid the ring on my finger, and we kissed right there on the street where this whole unlikely story began. Mrs. Rodriguez, who still lived in 4C, opened her window and shouted down, "Finally! I've been waiting for this for 2 years." Other windows opened, neighbors cheering and clapping. It was embarrassing and perfect, and so very us. So here's what really happened when I couldn't pay the rent. My landlord offered me a job, we fell in love, we built a life together. But more than that, I learned that hitting rock bottom doesn't mean you're broken. Sometimes it means you're ready for something different. I learned that accepting help isn't weakness. I learned that the person who saves you isn't necessarily the person with the most resources, but the person who sees your potential when you can't see it yourself. Christian didn't save me from poverty or failure. He gave me an opportunity, and I saved myself. But then we saved each other in all the ways that matter, from loneliness, from cynicism, from the idea that we had to face everything alone. People ask me if I ever feel weird about how we got together. "Doesn't it bother you that you were in such a vulnerable position?" they say. "Weren't you worried about the power dynamic?" And I tell them, yes, I worried. Yes, it was complicated. Yes, we had to be intentional about creating balance and boundaries, but love is always a risk and vulnerability is part of the human experience. What matters isn't that we started from unequal positions, what matters is that we worked to create equality. We got married in a small ceremony in Central Park, surrounded by friends, family, and several of Christian's tenants who'd become our friends. Mrs. Rodriguez cried through the whole thing. Christian's mother told everyone who would listen that she'd known from the beginning we were meant to be together. She absolutely had not known, but we let her have that. We bought a brownstone in Prospect Heights, a place that's neither mine nor his but ours. We renovated it together, arguing over tile choices and paint colors, learning to compromise and collaborate. It's not perfect, but it's home. I still do design work now with a small team working under me. Christian still manages his properties, now with Diana's help and his mother's occasional, unsolicited advice. We're both successful in ways that have nothing to do with each other and everything to do with supporting each other's dreams. And sometimes, late at night when we're lying in bed in our home that we own together, Christian will say, "Remember when you couldn't pay rent?" And I'll say, "Remember when you offered me a job instead of evicting me?" And we'll laugh at how unlikely this all was, how many things had to go wrong and then right for us to end up here. I couldn't pay the rent, so I made a deal with my landlord. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, a stopgap solution to an immediate crisis. Instead, it became the beginning of everything. 3 years later, update. I'm writing this from my office, a real office with a door and everything in the brownstone Christian and I share. Through the window, I can see him in the garden arguing with a rosebush that refuses to bloom properly. Some things never change. But some things do. Last month, we finalized the purchase of a fourth building, this one bought together, 50-50 partners. It's a property in the neighborhood where I grew up, and we're renovating it to provide affordable housing for artists and freelancers. People like I was 3 years ago, struggling to make it in an expensive city, needing just one break. We're calling it the Opportunity House, and we're structuring it with a program similar to what Christian offered me: work for rent arrangements, mentorship, community support. We want to create a space where people can take risks on their dreams without the terror of homelessness. You know, this is going to be a lot of work, Christian said when I first proposed the idea. I know, but it's work that matters. Then let's do it. That's us now, partners in every sense of the word, building something that's bigger than either of us alone. My design company is thriving. I have 5 full-time employees and a client list that includes some major brands. I make more money than I ever dreamed of making, and I love what I do. But I haven't forgotten what it felt like to be broke and scared and desperate. So we give back, we mentor young designers, we invest in small businesses, we pay it forward in every way we can. Christian's mother lives in an apartment we own now, fully accessible and close to medical care. She hosts Sunday dinners where she feeds half the neighborhood and tells everyone who will listen about how she always knew her son would find someone special. She definitely did not know, but it makes her happy. And me, I'm happy in a way I didn't know was possible. Not because someone rescued me, but because I learned I was worth rescuing. Not because I found someone to complete me, but because I found someone to grow with. If you're reading this and you're struggling financially, professionally, personally, I want you to know something: your circumstances don't define your worth. Your past doesn't dictate your future. And sometimes, when everything seems darkest, you're one decision away from everything changing. I couldn't pay the rent. It was the worst moment of my life at the time. Now, looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, not because I met Christian, but because I finally learned to ask for help, to accept support, to believe I deserved good things. The deal I made with my landlord saved my life, but the life I built after that was all me. Well, me and the man currently losing a fight with a rosebush in our garden. Need help? I call out the window. Christian looks up, dirt on his face and frustration in his eyes, and then he smiles, that smile that still makes my heart skip. Always, he calls back. And that, more than anything else, is what really happened when I couldn't pay the rent. I learned that needing help and offering it, accepting it and giving it, isn't weakness. It's how we survive. It's how we thrive. It's how we love. The end.